Hello, my name is John. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Servos. I'm the Director of Education for Fast Forward Medical Innovation, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's first webinar of a series of 6. I do have a few technical items to address, but before I do that, I'd like to turn things over to Dr. Viba Lama, who serves as the Vice Chair for Basic and Translational Research within the Department of Internal Medicine, to just say a few words of welcome.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. This is really very exciting for me because I want to start by saying welcome to everybody who's from internal medicine and outside internal medicine to this series. This is our first seminar in this series of 6. And you are in for a treat with excellent speakers, including John, Brad Martin, and Michael Renella. I want to stress something here, which is that as a researcher, as a clinician at Michigan who has been here around 24 years, I've always felt that I did not seek the connection with FFMI to be able to move things which I have thought about, discovered into commercialization. So really today's session is all about that first process of learning, where we hope that we can just get connected to FFMI and try to start thinking in this manner of innovation and commercialization. So a very special thank you to the team for putting this together. We really appreciate it. And with that, I will hand it back to you, John.
Great. Thank you, Viva. And we are equally excited to be here. So those technical items that I mentioned, if you'd like to ask a question today, please do. You can use the Q&A feature on the webinar to submit. And our staff will be monitoring that feature and answering your questions, as well as the chat function will be placing some links to some additional resources and pointing you in different directions based on what is discussed today. We are recording this presentation, so at the end of the event, we will be sure to send out that recording as well as a PDF version of the slides, and then of course a program evaluation at the end of this. So please take a few minutes to fill that out and help us improve upon our programming as we move forward. Today's webinar, as mentioned, is the first of 6. It's titled Intro to Research Commercialization, where we will discuss the importance of commercializing research, name several different pathways or common pathways for commercialization based on product categories, and then describe some very important resources available to you here at the University of Michigan and across the region, in fact. As Viva had mentioned, it's provided by Fast Forward Medical Innovation in partnership with the Department of Internal Medicine here at the University of Michigan. And at FFMI, we help biomedical researchers accelerate innovations from idea to impact. Next slide, please, Brad. Here you'll see the remaining of the seminar series. The next one will discuss specifically drug discovery and therapeutic development, followed by diagnostic technologies, digital health technologies, device development, and then finally some next steps in your commercialization pathway and some resources. Each one of these seminars will feature some preliminary discussion about nuances to each one of these product verticals. And then we will be sharing a case study example delivered by a faculty member here at the University of Michigan that are in the process of commercializing these types of technologies. Next slide, please, Brad. Today's speakers all come from Fast Forward Medical Innovation. You'll hear from Brad Martin next, who is the Managing Director of FFMI. Following Brad, I'll give a brief overview of our educational resources. And then at the end of today's presentation, you'll hear from Mike Renella, who serves as the Director of our Business Development arm. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brad now to get things started.
Thanks, John. And I also want to thank Viva for having the insight to put this group together within the internal medicine division. So I hope it'll be of value to all of you. And thank you to Viva for putting it together. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview about some of the resources and steps about commercializing technologies out of academia, as well as out of the University of Michigan specifically. And the whole reason we're talking about this is because a little bit of history for those of you that are old enough to remember, probably not very many of us, but In 1980, Congress passed something called the Bayh-Dole Act. And prior to that, it's a little known fact that the government owned all intellectual property that was derived from research that was funded by NIH. And so at the time, the government held over 28,000 patents and didn't do a very good job of licensing these technologies out or sharing them with the community. It wasn't a very good use of taxpayers' dollars. And so the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980 was passed. And what that allowed for is that the universities or companies, even if the work was funded by NIH grants or government funding in some way, owned that intellectual property. And so that really changed the way in which universities supported and thought about technologies and commercialized technologies. So it all really changed in 1980. And you can see that since that time, and the graph on the right-hand side here, there's been an enormous increase in the numbers of patents that are held by the universities. And the universities have done a much better job of outsourcing and sharing that intellectual property with the community at large. There's been over a tenfold increase in numbers of patents that are issued and licensed by universities since the passing of the Bayh-Dole Act. And when we talk about technologies that come out of the university, there's a couple different ways to define them. I won't get into this too much, but rather than just to give you some language or some common vocabulary that you may hear as you begin to develop technologies. And so the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, or NCATS, is the division within NIH that's in charge of commercializing technologies. And they have developed a system to classify research or technologies based on its stage of development. And they've got a system called, that runs between T0 and T4. And basically T0 is basic science down here at the bottom. And then once you begin clinical trials, T1, 2, 3, and 4 loosely correlate to the 4 stages of clinical trials, like phase 1, 2, 3, or 4 clinical trial. So this is really more geared towards early stage life science technologies. And I'll also just mention that there is an alternate path. Some of these slides do not want to advance. I'm sorry here. There's an alternate path called the Technology Readiness Level, or TRL. This is something that was put together in NASA in 1989, and it has a scale of TRL 1 through TRL 9, technology readiness levels. And for the most part, this deals with tech research, energy, telecommunications, that kind of thing, not so much for life science. This is more used for NSF, DARPA, and the Department of Defense. But regardless of whether we're talking about a TRL readiness level or an NCATS readiness level, the basic path from taking a research finding in the university and moving it to market is kind of summarized here in this slide. Basic research moves into translational research, and then eventually to the tech transfer office. And the University Tech Transfer Office is the common pinch point for all research and development within a university or academic setting. It's the job of the Technology Transfer Office to license this out to an existing company, to form a startup company around the technology, or to form an industry academic partnership. And that'll be the group that eventually takes it to market. Note that it's really not the job of the university to market these things. The University of Michigan does not market anything except for maybe, I've heard the joke, we sometimes will market athletic jerseys, but aside from that, we don't really market things at the University of Michigan. Rather, technology transfer will take care of putting these technologies out in the marketplace where they can then be commercialized. And when we think about this group or these resources, again, that NCATS readiness level, T0 through T4, kind of reside within this academic sphere here, whereas those that are involving the TRL scale are typically on the outside of the university in the private sector. But the problem is that for years and years and years, ideas and research coming out of the university, all universities, was sort of perceived as being not fully developed, kind of half-baked. And the problem is that the people on the right-hand side here, the private sector, the companies, the venture capitalists, always kind of viewed academic research as being somewhat half-baked, not quite fully de-risked enough to the point where they were really willing to write a check and support its development or bring it into their company. And on the left-hand side here are where the ideas are born. This is you people, ideas that the university. And in between them is something called this valley of death, which is sort of an ominous term that really describes the difficulty in translating an idea from the university to the private sector. And the difficulty is that this valley of death is getting wider and wider all the time. And in 2014, Fast Forward was established to help bridge this valley by providing resources, education, BD functions to help ideas get from the university faculty on the left to the outside community on the right. This is another graph that sort of was put together by the NIH to also summarize this valley of death in a little bit different fashion. What you see here on the bottom are the technology readiness levels between 1 and 9. So as we move to the right, technologies are getting more and more developed. Academic research or basic research is right down here. TRL levels 1 through 4 is simply funded by the government. The blue is the funding segments. The yellow is who participates. And you'll see that as you get out of the academic environment and into the private sector, the red line represents the resources that are available. And university resources are quite plentiful, but then there's this real dip in the resources, the dollars, the mentorship, the expertise to help bring it forward until you get out to the private sector. This, again, is that valley of death we're trying to fill in here. And part of the problem with the valley of death is that it's a very real thing and it's multifactorial. A lot of things could go wrong in bringing technology forward that could really have an adverse effect on its ability to be marketed. And so here again, we're kind of looking at the bridge over the valley. And there's multiple risk factors. The first is the science risk. That's the one that you guys can control. The only reason we're talking about a technology being commercialized at the University of Michigan is because the science looks pretty promising. So, but even if the science looks good, maybe you're going to have a hard time funding this research moving forward. Or maybe there's some safety considerations that are going to make the FDA very hesitant to bring it forward and approve it. Perhaps there's some competing intellectual property, or the market may not be very large to bring it forward. If any one of these things aren't there, the bridge falls down. And so it's not just about the science. The science can be very compelling, but it's really about having all of these things de-risked and understanding all of these things so that you know that you have a clear path between your discovery and impacting patient care. This is a diagram that I'm not going to go into, obviously, but it's just meant to show some of the complexities and the things that go wrong. This is a figure that was put together by the NIH, again, that NCATS group, which is, again, in charge of translational research, that shows the basic steps for bringing a small molecule or a biologic from discovery to approval. It's an eye chart. A lot of things have to go on. And the bottom line is that if any of these things go wrong, the process stops. They move on to the next molecule. So it's an ominous process that is really quite complicated. And a lot of things can go wrong. And so that's why there is a real risk adverse nature to some of the factors, the people that are involved in bringing drug discoveries forward. Here are some of the milestones. Again, we're talking specifically about drug discovery here and development of a therapeutic. But going from a commercial asset or an identified target to the point of an approved drug can take almost 6 years, at least 6 years. And these are some of the major steps that are shown here. The target validation, the screening to find a lead, developing a target product profile, in vitro and in vivo testing. These, again, are some of the things, the major steps that are in that eye chart I just showed you that could go wrong with developing a therapeutic. There's always been this adage that you need almost 5,000 to 10,000 compounds to find one approved drug. And that's because of how complex and how many things can go wrong in that drug development process. Now, this is typically the model within big pharma. Oftentimes within academia, we kind of jump to the point where we're doing preclinical work. We're not so much screening for molecules all the time unless we have a very well-characterized pathway that we want to begin to investigate. But typically, as you begin to go from drug discovery through preclinical and clinical trials, you're going to go from thousands of compounds down to one FDA-approved drug. So it is very much a long, risky road. And so therefore, we really need to have as many of these things de-risked and understood as we can if we want to get the outside world to be interested in our molecule or our biologic. or devices or diagnostics. Let's say you're developing a new catheter or a diagnostic assay of some kind. It's a little bit less cumbersome, but still things need to be understood. So as you go into the discovery and ideation phase for a device, what typically happens is that there is a iterative process whereby researchers are developing, validating, designing a prototype, bench testing, and then redesigning. And then the bench testing and the prototyping can be done and used in preclinical models. It's important to use the appropriate preclinical model. But this can be a vicious loop. Sometimes people can be stuck in this design, redesign, validate, reiterate for a number of years even. And so the process of developing a device can often get bogged down at this stage, where you're in this non-dilutive academic world. Typically, by the time the device has gotten to the point where you've got some really compelling data and you know that it's safe and effective, and you're beginning clinical trials, that's about the point in which the private sector often becomes involved in the non-dilutive funding. Oftentimes companies are formed and you're having regulatory assessments is done as well. So the pathway is much more involved for drugs, but for devices, it also has just a major loop regarding the prototyping and validation, the preclinical models, which we do here at the university. And perhaps the most interesting vertical, and one I know the absolute least about, is the digital health development pathway. You're seeing more and more every day, people are developing apps or algorithms that are really nothing more than software. The general school of thought regarding regulation by the FDA for apps and algorithms is that if what you're developing is going to influence clinical decision-making, it needs to be regulated by the FDA and approved by the FDA. If it's just a tool that really doesn't change the way that which a physician would treat a patient, it's free of that oversight by the FDA. But what's really important with developing a digital health application is this understanding it's very easy to develop a prototype. They often say that if you give a couple of graduate students all the Mountain Dew they can drink, you can have an app in the course of 24 hours. But does anybody want that app or need that app? The problem is not developing it. It's really developing something that people want. It's about the contextual inquiry, talking to your customers, understanding what drives value in their mind, and developing a business model to get it to those customers. And that is something that our educational programs really stress and can be very helpful in helping you to understand. So this is the newest, probably the most active pathway or vertical that we have right now at the University of Michigan. It's kind of evolving, probably the least understood, but certainly has a very, very low barrier to entry. Should I be keeping an eye on the questions here, Catherine? Please paste hyperlinks in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
Okay. In terms of institutional importance, this has become a very big deal for the University of Michigan. Fast forward has evolved from the point where in 2013, when we would begin to talking to at faculty meetings or to department chairs about what we were doing here to support commercialization, we used to get questions about, does the dean know what you're doing? Thinking that we were up to something that was very nefarious. Now it's evolved to the point where what we're doing here at Fast Forward and the process of commercializing research has become a key part of the university's or the medical school's research strategy. These numbers that I'm showing you here are university-wide. They're not just for the medical school per se, but in 2019, total revenues back to the university from inventions that have been licensed equaled $16 million. And that was a 38% increase from the year before. And we're seeing a year-over-year increase in these licenses from the university. The university typically launches about 15 to 20 startups a year. There's been 86 in the last 5 years. We're actively supporting our startups in a variety of ways, both before they form as well as after they are launched. And what we track on a routine basis here is the numbers of patents that have been issued to our faculty. And on an annual year, we get about 200 patents that are issued. That's not just filing, that's issued patents on an annual basis. So it's very important for the university. And of that $16 million that I mentioned, that money does flow back to departments and schools and colleges. This is the university's revenue distribution chart that shows how revenues are distributed between inventors, faculties, schools, and colleges. And so it is a very important part of the university's revenue stream as well as the departments. So there's a huge economic impact to the university, and I think this really much says what I mentioned in the last slide. And you can see that there's been a big increase in the return to the university, as well as its importance in our overall R&D budget. And so what we're showing here are the total industry awards to the university, to the medical school here in this case, over time. And the blue bars are the dollar amounts of these industry awards. And again, in 2019, the medical school had almost $130 million in industry awards. And that accounts for almost 20% of our overall R&D budget within the university. This is largely the work of Mike Ranella and the BD team. You'll hear about Mike in a little bit, but the point is that working with industry, licensing to industry, becomes a huge part of the university's overall R&D budget. An additional factor for the university is that we're going to establish, all of this work establishes an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And that entrepreneurial ecosystem can really be important for attracting and retaining talented young faculty members. Being able to say to a junior faculty member that we're going to support your commercialization efforts, we value those research efforts, can really be important in attracting the top tier faculty, because that's oftentimes what they're doing. But you as an individual, why should you bother? What's in it for you? Again, it's not part of your normal day-to-day research process. Some of what we're asking people to do is outside the box. Why should you bother? And there's a couple of reasons. Hopefully I can convince you that it is worth your while. Probably the first and foremost reason is that I think if you asked 100 people why they got into medical research or biomedical research, 99 of them are going to say that they wanted to improve patient care of the human condition. And the fact of the matter is that even if you view commercialization as being somewhat unsightly or nefarious, if you will, the fact of the matter is that somebody is going to have to commercialize your idea if it's going to be brought out to a larger patient population. Ignore. So as an example of this, many of you probably know Bob Bartlett from cardiac surgery. Bob in the late 90s, or I'm sorry, early 90s, developed what's called the ECMO, which is a way to support injured or underdeveloped lungs and pulmonary function in those patients. It was largely a research project. He didn't think too much of it, but he knew that he had seen babies that had underdeveloped lungs dying, and so he had to do something about it. It was very much came from an altruistic standpoint on his behalf. In 1995, this is a picnic he had here in Ann Arbor, showing the young children that he had helped basically save with his device. I'm sure that this kind of outpouring of affection and gratitude really helps Bob sleep at night. And again, this is in 1995. Imagine how big this group would be now in 2022. His efforts and his commercialization efforts and foresight to commercialize it have saved countless lives. And if you really would like to have a broader impact on human health, somebody's going to have to commercialize this. The other reason you should get involved in this process is because industry needs it. Industry needs your inventions, because back in the 80s, 90s, even in the early 2000s, large pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies developed technology on their own. They had R&D programs. There's been a very dramatic shift. Now industry buys technology rather than developing it themselves. And so there is a tremendous opportunity to engage with industry. And again, Mike will talk about this in a minute, who want to acquire technologies. They want to license technologies from the universities so that they can develop them. And even if you don't have an altruistic motivation here, maybe you have a financial interest here, because one of the things I didn't point out, but on this same investor revenue distribution table, this first line here, you'll notice a large portion of this revenue goes to the inventors. And so there are several individuals on campus who are driving some fairly nice cars because of devices or technology they developed here. And so there is a financial motivation for you if that's what moves you. But about a third of the, most of our inventions are over $200,000, I'm sorry, $2 million when they're licensed. So it's typically this pathway here. It's about a third, and a third going to the inventor, the school, and to the central campus. So it can be significant. Also, promotion and tenure is now looking at innovation and commercialization portfolios as well. So in the same way that you would submit a education or clinical care or research portfolio, you can now submit an innovation entrepreneurship portfolio. I think they're still working out how does a Nature paper compare to a patent, but they're getting there. At least they're looking at it. So it does behoove you personally as well to go down this pathway, because it could be part of your P&T promotion process. And in addition, I think that I've heard people say that they get a lot of value out of the program because, or out of commercialization, because it does bring some national prestige. Those that are treating patients at multi-center trials or have a commercial product on the market are often invited to national meetings, talking at platform presentations. It allows them to expand their network and their knowledge base. And again, this alternative funding angle and working with industry can be very attractive and help support fairly large labs. I know that Bob Bartlett, for example, again, has a lot of industry interactions, and it has a fairly large lab because of that. So when do I have something that's worth translating? How do I know when this thing that I've been working on for years, I've had a number of RO1s on it, let's say, how do I know if it is worth developing and translating? Well, I think as you continue on that research development and continuum, there comes a point when you move from doing R&D to product development. Again, there's going to come a point when you submit grants to NIH, and they don't typically fund product development. They typically stop funding research at some point. When you get to that point where your questions are really about the details of a product or details of about a particular molecule, then you've really gotten to the product development stage. Also, if you're going to national meetings and you're giving platform presentations, when you come off the stage, you're being inundated with requests for your business cards or working together on industry interactions. That's pretty good indication that people are out there clamoring for what you're developing. So just be aware of the fact that if people are asking you what the plans are for technology, it may be because they have an interest. Also, if you're working on something that is really highly novel versus an iterative approach, it tends to move faster. If you're working on a very well understood disease and you're developing the fifth in its class of, let's say, a statin, that's not very exciting. However, if you have a new first-in-class drug that's highly novel, sometimes that is translated and brought into industry at a much earlier stage. Also, if you're working on something with a large unmet need for which there's very few therapeutic interventions, that also tends to accelerate the timeline for commercialization. And again, the timeline and valuation vary by sector. Health IT, as I mentioned, is a very low bar to entry, but there's also a very limited valuation on apps unless they're very extraordinary. And in contrast, a first-in-class small molecule for a disease with a high unmet need could have enormous valuations. And so those sorts of things kind of affect when and whether you should translate what you're working on and commercialize it. So if you come to the conclusion that, hey, this idea of mine, this project that I've been working on for years really does have some value, how do I get started? A couple things. First and foremost, you've got to protect that. Intellectual property, as I said in the very first slide in the Bayh-Dole Act, it's all about intellectual property. Licensing only occurs if there is university-held intellectual property that can be licensed out. And so the first step is often to go talk to the tech transfer office, or as it's now called, as innovation partnerships. There's the phone number for them. And the very first step is going to be to submit an invention disclosure. It's a very easy process. It requires no more than 5 or 10 minutes on the phone with one of your the tech transfer reps. Then what that does is that secures your filing date. The date, it'll say that on this particular date, Dr. Smith had this idea, and we can protect it from that time forward. At that point, you can begin to talk about it on a little bit broader scale. But again, work with your tech transfer colleagues to figure out how best to protect it. Then come talk to us. We have a number of resources that we can begin to throw to you to help you develop this technology. Idea consultations. It's never too early to come talk to us. Even if you're not sure if you should go to tech transfer yet, you can come to us in idea consultation. We'll help you figure out what you have and what you don't have and what stage it's at and who might want it. So the idea consultations occur every day of the week. So anytime you want to reach out to us, please do so. Our email is down below. We have innovation studios, which is a little bit more. We bring a team of mentors around an idea to help you really brainstorm in a very quick fashion. We have educational programs that John will talk about in a moment that are really geared towards you, helping you understand what are the nuances of developing a therapeutic versus a device versus a health IT app, much like these programs that we're on here today in this internal medicine course. And then you'll hear from Mike again. Mike does a fantastic job of interacting with industry and helping you connect with industry. And that goes both directions, whether you want to reach out to a company about something they're working on, or whether a company wants to find out who within the internal medicine group is working on the most attractive new therapy for biliary stenosis, let's say, whatever the case may be. Reach out to us. There's our email address. And I think I will stop there and turn it over to John.
That's great.
Any questions for me before I move on and John talks about the educational programs?
Yeah, during this transition period, let's ask any questions that you might have. There's, in fact, two. Brad, I'll take the first one. The first one asks about hyperlinks. So as a reminder, we're going to send out these slides as well as a recording. And so any of the references, links to references, you will have access to within the slides. And then while Brad was speaking, we were posting several different links to additional resources in the chat. So please be sure to review that. The second question, Brad, I'll let you tackle. It asks about, well, I'll just read it to you. Is it true that industrial collaboration and grants get less weightage for promotion purposes compared to NIH?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
Can jump in, Brad, and say that things have changing around the, our promotion process a lot. As you guys know that we have different tracks now for promotion process. And collaboration, team science is definitely one of the things which we value much more now than what we did 10 years ago. I always say, let's think of a portfolio as a diverse portfolio. So if you have NIH funding, you have industry collaboration, you are using foundations, that's a very strong portfolio. So not relying only on one, but having a diverse portfolio is a strength. And I think that's looked at very positively for promotion purposes. I'll stop here.
Okay.
You want to add it?
Anything else? Otherwise, I went a little bit long. I apologize, but I'll turn it over to John if there's no other questions.
Yes. Okay, so thank you.
Those
So
links are in the chat, not the Q&A.
correct. And I've noticed that some of the things that have been posted have gone just to hosts and panelists. So Catherine, maybe as I'm speaking, we can copy those over and post them to everybody. If not, when I'm done talking about the education group and Mike begins speaking, I will gladly copy those links over for you again. So let me share my screen. I am going to very briefly give you an overview of some of the educational resources that Brad had mentioned. I want to give you a little bit of a flavor as to who we are, and then tell you a little bit more about what we do and how you can get involved. So just real quickly, as Brad mentioned, since 2014, we've run a variety of different training programs, north of 100 that have some substance behind them. So these are multi-week training programs. We've had more than 4,300 participants, and we've helped support more than 350 different innovations across those product verticals. So these are devices, diagnostics, therapeutics, all of the sorts. We've had 31 institutions, in fact, come to the University of Michigan and observe what we're doing in these training programs so that they can go back to their institution and offer them to faculty there. And we've also published 13 different journal articles and abstracts, kind of disseminating best practice on how to offer commercialization education to faculty in the life science space. You'll notice that our participants are primarily faculty and trainee that are coming from the University of Michigan, either from the School of Medicine, the medical school, or engineering. But we do have quite a bit coming from other life science colleges and schools like the School of Public Health and so forth, here on campus. Some notable programs. So we do many types of webinars and seminars and one-day workshops or 1 hour workshops like this one and the next 5 that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. You'll see some additional examples there on the right of things that we've done recently. My best advice for you to know about what's coming up is to join our newsletter, because we are regularly blasting information about these webinars and additional resources through FFMI through those resources. So I'll be sure to paste the link directly to our newsletter sign up as soon as I'm done talking here. These 2 programs specifically are what I would describe as our flagship programs, especially if you are working on a project. So the one there on the left, the fast-paced course, also has been in place since 2014. You get to actively work on the project that you have, whether it be device, diagnostic, software, therapeutic. It's done in a relatively short amount of time, so 5 weeks. And really what we're trying to do is help you build an initial business case for commercialization in those 5 weeks and help you support that business case with some data, some qualitative data that you'll receive through some interviews, through some really key stakeholders that will challenge you to think about who may be. And we do this in collaboration with the Innovation Partnerships Group here on campus, which is Tech Transfer, as well as the Center for Entrepreneurship. And we know that faculty that have taken this course with their projects have graduated and gone on to receive more than $40 million in follow-on funding from several different mechanisms. The one on the right is very similar. It probably is more like a traditional course that you might be familiar with. So there's a didactic piece and then a lab piece where you get to work on your project and apply everything that you're hearing during the didactic piece. This one is specific to cardiovascular innovations because it is sponsored by the Frankel Cardiovascular Center here on campus. And it does include one difference between the 2 here is that this one, the ACIDS Innovation Academy, does include some funding in the amount of $5,000 to $15,000 to use for some development work based on what it is that you're doing. Some notable programs, perhaps for some trainees that you're working with. We have a biotech career exploration program. So this program is for those that are interested in non-tenure based academic careers, maybe in careers in small biotech or large pharma. And basically, we put a series of career panels and skill building seminars in place for them. And they participate as a cohort, and we generally have 50 to 60 graduate students and postdocs participating each time we offer this program. And if they want to take it even a step further, we offer a certificate in biomedical innovation entrepreneurship where we ask them to take 2 additional graduate level courses in entrepreneurship that we can recommend that they participate in. And then finally, and this falls in line with many of the links that we've been posting, or I was posting during Brad's talk, is that we have many online at your pace educational modules to get you started. The drug discovery one is one that I linked to and will copy over here in a second that has more than 15 experts coming from the University of Michigan and outside the University of Michigan and 20 hours of instruction on academic drug discovery. And this was done in place with the Michigan Drug Discovery Group here on campus. It's all done within the Canvas learning management system. So it's really well done and a very valuable resource. On the right-hand side there, you'll see just an example of several different self-paced modules that we call them. They're fun, they're interactive. They touch on things like intellectual property, FDA regulation of medical devices, and so forth. And then we always have a video library on our YouTube channel, and it also links to our website on a variety of different topics that can get you started in your journey here. But as Brad mentioned, you're always welcome to come to FFMI for an initial consultation or as part of the Innovation Studio, and we'll continue to point you to additional educational programs that are appropriate for what you want and what your goals might be. Okay, I am going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn things over now to Mike, who's going to finish us up with business development. I'll quickly check the Q&A to make sure there's no education related questions, Mike, as you transition. Doesn't appear to be. So it is all yours.
Okay, great. Thanks, John. And thanks, Viva, for the introductions and inviting the FFMI team to this education session. So quickly, I'm Mike Ranella. I help run the business development team within our Fast Forward Medical Innovation program. I work within a team of 4, Deborah Grega, Amelia Metra, Keska, and Shelby Unsworth, where we help focus on supporting the med school research faculty in all the different domains that are out there, as well as making good contacts in the external space with industry partners. So each one of us are out in the field. We're working with our faculty to really understand where the science is at, where our expertise lies inside of our institution, as well as going outside the institution, working with industry partners to identify where there could be these matchmaking opportunities of synergy, of success, if you will. So hopefully across the board, even within a large department like internal medicine, we've got different team members that are engaging with different faculty members and companies that you're working with. So quickly, business development, functionally, what are we trying to do? We recognize that as federal funding is continuing to be less and more competitive, diversification to keep a stable portfolio of research activity going is necessary. There's a lot of different resources that one investigator can use to get their funded research going. Federal funding, of course, is well known. There's foundations that you can get your research supported by, patient advocacy groups, through philanthropy and gifts, as well as with industry. Our team focuses on and has expertise on the industry side. There are different development teams across the institution that have similar naming. I will tell you that if it comes to us, if it's industry, this is where we're going to have expertise. We would be handing off, if it's a gift, let's say from a grateful patient for your research. What we're seeing in the market trends, Brad's mentioned, and we are seeing that. The data suggests that too as well in terms of industry's investment with academic research scientists, both in clinical trials or in labs, around acquisition of new technology. This activity is all being focused within academia. This is our opportunity essentially to be partnering with industry to do academics discovery in our space and be a win-win for both sides. So for us, we want to focus in on the companies that want to work with academia. There's not always that familiarity between what industry's needs are and what and academic research scientists are. I give for instance, industry timelines tend to be expeditious, fast, accelerated. In the academic world, we'll get to it when we get there. I've got 1 or 2 other things to do first, but then I'll do it. We have that essentially that clash, if we will. Part of our team is really helping focus in on facilitating and helping with timeline expectations, budgeting expectations. So in that way, it really is a win-win opportunity. I always like to walk through kind of what does this look like when it comes to working with industry from an academic lens. Really, first of all, we want to look at this from a translational research pipeline perspective. We can have basic science research, preclinical research, clinical trials, real-world evidence-based technology research. We can have community and population research. The type of deals that we would do across the translational pipeline can be anything from consulting, where you are the KOL, the company wants to work with you because you know something that'll help enhance their business plans, their R&D plans. We can do other sponsored activities through service. So you might have within your lab or your space capabilities that they want to purchase and use to help go forward with their technology. Or we have classic sponsored research with IP generating activities. You as the investigator might have ideas that are investigator initiated that would potentially be using a company's asset, let's say, to do a new indication for. And then of course we have the traditional clinical trial design, which is really, it's a protocol driven activity by the sponsor, owned by the sponsor too as well. All of these opportunities are in play and ones that we're looking for as opportunities to match our faculty researchers and with companies as well. We recognize too, and we set up the service or the model as a service, the customer being University of Michigan research faculty. You are the faculty we help serve. We want to understand what your expertise is and what you're trying to get done. And we try and help facilitate within a large organization like the university, the different layers that many times I think when I talk to faculty, sometimes I'd say, hey, I want to work with so-and-so, and we're trying to get this contract done. Who do you go to? There's a lot of different entities out there. You've already heard today about innovation partnerships, formerly known as tech transfer. But are they the ones that are going to sign off on a contract for a research sponsored activity? Well, not necessarily. That could be the Office of Sponsored Research and Sponsored Programs, ORSP. Our team is going to help try and facilitate and get to the right team members quickly. So then that way we can accelerate through the organization and get to that endpoint where we've got contract execution and we could get started with sponsored research activities. It also helps level set the expectations on time, which is one of those really important parameters I would say that industry has, as well as our research faculty teams. So for us, we look at the faculty as our internal customer, and then our external customer really is the industry partner. We are trying to balance between what companies are looking for and wanting from an academic partner and what our academic researchers want from an industry partner. I would say classically, our academic partners, they just want funding, right? That's a big goal of ours all the time, and then being able to publish. So being able to weigh that out with industry as well too, so that there's some sort of synergy there and there's this overlap is one of the crucial elements that we work with. We try and vet companies as well too, so that if they're not a good partner with academic researchers, we can steer them away from some of our faculty as well too. So for us, this slide kind of highlights what I'm getting into, which is we're looking for a fit that is win-win for both sides of the house. In other words, we would love to have companies working with us that are good partners. It's not that we do everything for them and we do it in their timelines and under their budget, but rather we have academic discovery that we feel is important that we can publish on and that we want to work forward with as well too, and that we've aligned philosophically. If it's a company that's going to give you $20 million to do the research, but they're an absolute bear to work with, we might give you the recommendation it's not worth having this deal done. And trust me, we've had those conversations and those deals have come up before. So my advice is that as an approach from a business development team perspective, we try and help hash out what those win-win opportunities look like. And we at any point in time want to be part of this conversation. And it can be at the very beginning when you're talking with a company. It can be at the very end, right before you sign the contract, if you will, because what we want to see is that win-win opportunity. In addition to that, we feel that best predictors of success are historical experiences working between the University of Michigan and an industry partner. I'll give you the examples that many times over, you'll see a company that says, look, I've worked with Michigan for the last 10 years. It's been great working with you guys. Where else can we work with you guys in other areas? I had that conversation just this morning with Novartis. We're doing great in oncology. They want to expand it. As they asked me, don't you have any other, opportunities in the non-oncology space? Yes. I mean, the short answer, absolutely, yes, we do. What areas are we talking about? And now we're going to start diving into it. Is it in pulmonary, or is it in the neurodegenerative? Is it in, short-term memory? These are the things that we're diving into. But one of the big reasons why we're having this conversation is that there's a history of success there. There's a philosophical alignment. So for us, our goal really is to facilitate productive interactions between industry and our academic research faculty. The goal is not to always drive forward with a deal, with a contract executed and money in, so to speak, because sometimes the best deal done has never been completed, right? In other words, we stopped it early in the process and we abandoned it, and we now have the opportunity to do something else with our time and our resources. So to walk you through what an experience would look like working with a business development officer and with our faculty, we want to provide that one-on-one support. That means meeting with our faculty, understanding what the research is and where the strengths lie of this opportunity, working with you and potentially an industry partner. If there's educational programming that's needed, we certainly want to steer you towards that. There's John's commercialization education programming, which I think has got a broad portfolio of opportunities that you can dive into based on your knowledge and skill set and what you're looking for. In addition to that, we can leverage other resources outside of the medical school that would be complementary for you to help continue to boost your experience in working with industry. For us, we also want to focus in on what the opportunities are with industry. So we go out, we talk to our industry partners to understand where's the market forces are at, where they're shifting to, and where can we be as an organization ready to fulfill that. I gave you the example that lately clinical trials from the Cures Act, there's now this approach to digitizing, virtualizing, decentralizing clinical trials. So in other words, the brick and mortar traditional approach of patient comes in, you enroll them in the study, it's still there, but a new book of business is forming around companies now that are focusing in on why not do population-based, decentralized, patient never walks into the clinic whatsoever. We just want a population. So we're exploring those opportunities. is there expertise here at the university, which there are a few investigators that have expressed some interest and or have been doing it. So these are the types of things that we're focusing in on both sides, competitive intelligence gathering on the company side, as well as our academic researchers. Next, we have good working relations with the different entities that are going to help drive forward contract execution. So talking with innovation partnerships, if it requires intellectual property or if it's a material transfer, versus if it's a data use agreement with ORSP. If it's a consulting opportunity, maybe it's talking with David Muller's team, which I know, David, you're on today too. It's being able to help dive into what those would look like as well too, and then execute with an ORSP. For us, though, we want to help set that expectations both with our academic researchers as well as with our industry partners. I think meeting expectations is critical in terms of both the feeling of a win-win success and then that future opportunity to build out that next big opportunity with that company or with that researcher with a new industry partner. The other thing is we do have a Rolodex or a portfolio of companies that we can be engaging with. So if funding opportunities are popping up from either RFP challenges by companies and or if we have researchers asking for connections with industry in certain spaces that could fund their research, reach out to us and we can potentially have an opportunity where we can make that matchmaking happen as well too. So quickly, if I were to just walk through what this looks like from a pipeline perspective, the contract execution for us, if there's new opportunities in which you're talking to a company, we'd love to have that conversation with you and that potential industry sponsor at any point in time, especially early on. What we can help do is help align expectations. It can be time, it could be money, it could be deliverables. It can also be then that we start to work through in writing what the statement of work looks like. In other words, I'm going to do this in my lab and get it to you in the next 6 months. This is how much potentially it's going to cost. And, you're going to give us back the report after that. That could be a statement of work essentially that we start to draft up. That would then lead into our budget and milestones that we would lock into stone, if you will. And we can help negotiate that too as well and build out what that looks like. And then routing it through legal review and as well as any regulatory requirements. Those are the things that we'll be looking for and helping support as well along the way. We work closely with the department's research administrative staff too, as well. I want to emphasize that across the board. We're not necessarily doing all of it ourselves. We will work within the local unit's required workflow. That's how I'll put it. Because each section, even within internal medicine, does it slightly different from our experience. Our goal, though, is that we keep this process moving along. We align our expectations from step 1 all the way through to step 5 and 6, where we have contract execution. And we constantly have communication going back and forth between study team members as well as with the company. The hope here is that we get done with the contract in which we get started, we put the study team in the best position possible, we deliver on our goals and our deliverables that have been outlined, and hopefully with that, it comes through as a win-win for both sides and future opportunities working together. Again, a predictor of future success is making sure that we line up the here and now and work through that process and align right away on a win-win. I'll say, other than that, I think time-wise, we got just a few minutes left, so I'll stop there. Thank you for your attention. Does anybody have any questions?
Good. Thank you, Mike.
I think I saw a few questions about whether this will be available as a recording, and I think that's quite important because for those of you who were able to attend today, thank you very much. I understand everyone's busy, but this is a webinar which is going to be available for you. Am I right, John? They can go in anytime and access the webinar?
Yes, the plan is to send a direct link for the webinar recording to anybody that registered and attended today, as well as make it available on our website. So you'll have two different options.
So those of you who are here, please do let your colleagues, your mentees, anybody you want to know, and if you think it'll be helpful for them, they can log in anytime and watch over whatever section they want to watch over. So which would be wonderful.
Next question that's submitted says, are commercialization services mostly available to the faculty or trainees as well? So from an education perspective, absolutely both of those audiences, faculty, trainees, staff, always welcome in any of our educational programs.
Even individuals outside the university.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a few more minutes. I did want to say something, which is that every time I talk to you guys, I learn something more. And I know I've spoken to you all individually, but this presentation was great. And thank you so much. I want to first say thank you. But I also want to say that interacting with you, I found it very easy. So I would recommend to everybody who's listening to this, please go to the FFMI website, which I thought I discovered too late in life. And just, there's a simple click. And I put in a simple click and I said, I want to discuss this. And the next thing I knew, I had an email from Brad, who is the director of this thing. So I was pretty amazed, like the ability to contact you guys was just wonderful. And I wanted to say that, and then let's use those resources. And Michael, I also wanted to point out to our researchers that what you are mentioning is a very unique resource, because at times I've thought about that I wanted to connect with a specific drug company because it makes a drug and I want to use it in my system, but I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know we had a resource in you available in your section of FFMI where I could say, do you think we could make some inroads? So I just wanted to point it out to the faculty.
That's very kind. Thank you, Viva. Yeah, we try very hard to be a customer service organization, and in this case, the customers are our faculty. So we try to bend over backwards to help if we can.
Absolutely, yeah. I think point of contacts are really important. That's why our team does. I make the mention that we've got both contacts internally with our U of M researchers, but then also with companies. Sometimes the best advice that we can give you is company X is very difficult to work with. To even get a conversation going with them, it's going to be low probability, right? So again, level setting even expectations for our researchers, very important. So, yep.
Thank you so much, everyone. John, I was hoping we could put that slide up again about the upcoming seminars, because I think they've been all geared towards faculty in different arenas. And I'm hoping that some areas which might be interesting to you or somebody else in your group, so please let them know. So we really of the series as well.
Very good. Yep, it's being displayed right now. And the last thing I'll mention too is the evaluation that will go out post-program along with all of these resources. So thank you again. Venture to the website and register for the next session, which is drug discovery and therapeutic development on January 25th, same time.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you to the speakers. Thank you, John, Brad. Thank you.